Hey guys, remember when I said I actually really liked the 6th season of SpongeBob SquarePants? Oh god, that statement tastes like milk. Look, I don't know if you noticed this already, but I do not like my past videos from 2019 and 2020. While there were some things I do stand by what I said during those reviews, there were also times where my opinions were completely off. Plus, for most of my videos, I just ad-libbed all of it. Simply put, I was terrible at reviewing these videos back then. Over time, I've been trying to learn from my mistakes and try to make better reviews. And this is where we are now today. So, Season 6. This was the point I feel people were starting to lose interest in the show. There were so many bad episodes in this season, and some of these episodes have cracked people's top 10 worst episodes of the show. And not even some of the better episodes of the season could save it. So it's time that, once again, we take a look at the best and worst of Season 6. I am so tired of saying that. And of course, as with most lists, it's all based off of my opinions, and you may disagree with some of them. But I will still stay respectful to some people who disagree with me. Anyways, let's just get this over with. This is the top 5 worst episodes of Season 6. Number 5. Professor Squidward. In this episode, Squidward becomes a music teacher after being mistaken for the famous musician Squilliam Fancyson. But to his dismay, SpongeBob and Patrick happen to be attending his class. So he has to make sure they don't blow his cover, and they have to act behaved in his class to stay in. There's really not much I can say about this episode. It just feels like a cookie-cutter episode where SpongeBob and Patrick bother Squidward in some way. And the way it's executed isn't even worth talking about. Honestly, I was really bored watching this episode. And in all honesty, I wasn't really siding with Squidward here. Mostly because he's convicting the crime of identity theft, impersonating Squilliam Fancyson just to get the music teacher job. And honestly, that's all there really is to it. I mean, I should be thankful because this episode could have been a lot worse, but it's still rather forgettable.
This is what's known as a metronome.
Hey, my mom has one of those in her garden.
Oh no, SpongeBob, that was a garden gnome.
Number 4. Sun Bleached. Famous celebrity Craig Mamelton is hosting a party for every tan fish in Bikini Bottom. To get in, SpongeBob and Patrick install a tanning bed, but Patrick accidentally leaves SpongeBob in the bed for 2 hours, leaving him sun-bleached. So now they had to find a way for SpongeBob to look tan for the party. An episode that encourages audiences to glorify something that is really unhealthy and could possibly leave one permanently damaged? What could possibly go wrong? No, but seriously, this episode is really unpleasant to watch. And I'm not just referring to the fact that SpongeBob looks hideous with the sun-bleached skin. No, the big issue with this episode is the characters. Patrick got his tan on and was given the task to help SpongeBob with his tan. And what does Patrick do? He leaves SpongeBob after he's done and eventually goes out without letting SpongeBob out of the tanning bed. Even as a kid, I felt mad at him for letting SpongeBob get severely hurt in the bed. I mean, I guess I should be relieved that SpongeBob didn't desperately try to get out of the bed and break the light in the process. Nor did the bed overheat to a point it exploded, leaving him to burn alive. Oh, seriously, I will never get that image out of my brain.
Oh, come now, it wasn't all that bad.
You have no idea what I've gone through after that.
Hey guys, look, this guy's still buttered from last month.
We're never gonna discuss about that ever again! Jeez. Anyways, fast forward to the end, and everyone else seems to not only glorify how SpongeBob's permanently damaged his skin just for the sake of getting to the party, but even decide to join in and eventually kill themselves. Again, I didn't feel comfortable watching this as a kid. Overall, this episode is just awful. The imagery is awkward and cringy, most of the characters are really unlikable, and the message the episode tries to give just angers me. Just stay away from this episode.
Oh, Patrick, how do you feel?
Like one of those hip young old folks from a soda commercial.
It's radical! Radical! Drink it!
Number 3. Cephalopod Lodge. Every third Wednesday, Squidward is found in a happy mood, which concerns SpongeBob since he's never usually this happy. Turns out Squidward is a part of a group known as the Cephalopod Lodge. However, SpongeBob and Patrick follow him into the club, and as a result, Squidward is accused of letting outsiders inside the lodge and is kicked out of it. SpongeBob and Patrick try to help Squidward out, but he refuses to cooperate. This was really frustrating. It was bad enough that this episode is about SpongeBob and Patrick making Squidward lose the one thing that made him happy, but the execution is far worse. Why is it a bad thing that Squidward is seen happy one day, let alone a specific day? I get why he would think that, because Squidward doesn't normally show positive emotion. But how is that a problem? Not to mention how oblivious he and Patrick are when Squidward gets kicked out of the lodge.
They kicked me out of the Cephalopod Lodge.
Do we get to join the lodge?
Were you dropped on your head when you were a baby?
How did you know?
Psychic powers.
Heck, even when they try to get him back into the lodge, it seems successful at first, but then they decide to f*** it up and get him kicked out again! I really hated SpongeBob and Patrick in this episode, as they're the main cause of the conflict. Also, the lodge is just a bunch of idiots. Like, they're scared of what clearly looks like a giant sock. Even Courage the Cowardly Dog would tell them to man up. It makes me question why Squidward would want to hang out with such weenies, but it still doesn't make me feel less sorry for him since he was happy there. This was just a terrible episode throughout, and left me feeling frustrated from beginning to end. Oh, and one more thing. I have received comments bringing up how I said Patrick worsened the situation by pinning the blame on the guard. After looking back on it, yes, he was right about it being on the guard for not noticing SpongeBob and Patrick getting through him. However, the point I was getting across is that even if he was right, Patrick shouldn't have said that. But because he did, it only made the situation even worse. Plus, it isn't really specified how they got in. Maybe they distracted guard in the front door, or maybe they got in a different way. But I will clarify that you made a point about that mistake. Shoutouts to IDK and Animation Rainwright Wolf for pointing that out. But even with that mistake, this is still a terrible episode.
These camouflage outfits should help us find out what Squidward's Secret Wednesday secret is.
Number 2. The Splinter. In this episode, SpongeBob is preparing for work and suffers an accident when he ends up with a huge splinter on his thumb. But he struggles to get it out because it's too deep, so he has to work around getting through the day with a splinter in his thumb. I'm not kidding. That is the summation of this entire episode. And holy shit, it is horrendous. There's literally no thought, no stakes, no intrigue. It's literally just nothing but graphic imagery that would more likely scar a kid than make them laugh. Like, I remember when I first watched this when I was 6 years old, and it gave me real anxiety about ending up with a splinter. And Nickelodeon, the definitive children's network, was okay with it. What were they all smoking when they greenlit this episode? Not to mention, the jokes in this episode, with one exception, are insufferable. Like, they're not just unfunny, but they are so awful that they would even make the Joker cringe. I honestly don't know what else there is to say about this episode. It's just lazy and painful to sit through. It's not the worst episode I've seen, but it is quite close.
Come on, SpongeBob. It's just a little splinter. I mean, how bad could it be? Oh, merciful Neptune.
Number 1. Choir Boys. In this episode, Squidward is getting ready to attend his audition at the Bikini Bottom Men's Choir. SpongeBob wishes to attend the audition with them, but Squidward refuses to take him. So SpongeBob tries to go out of his way to convince Squidward to take him in practice. But this only ends up making Squidward's trip way harder than planned. Will he make it to his auditions in time and ace them? Now, I mentioned in the previous video that you really have to try to get on my bad side. Like, you actively have to try hard to really get me mad. And this episode goes far beyond the Call of Duty to do so. This entire episode is mean-spirited, full of relentless Squidward torture, humorless, lazy, and extremely painful to watch. Where do I even begin with this dumpster fire? Well, for starters, the pacing of this episode is so slow. It feels like everything in this episode feels like an eternity. They constantly drag jokes on for a really long time, and none of them are even that funny. Not to mention, SpongeBob is a complete asshole. Not only does he constantly bother Squidward, but he also results in harming him. And yet he doesn't even care.
Squidward, could you keep it down, please? Trying to find my starting pitch here.
Oh, go yourself. Squidward has done absolutely nothing in this episode to deserve this. And the fact that the episode drags out those moments for a really long time is even more infuriating. And by the end, we eventually get to the worst part about the episode. They still continue to drag out the moments, just to give an excuse for SpongeBob to make it in just in time, and outshine everyone else and steal Squidward's dreams.
I'm done, I'm fucking done! Fuck you, 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 I'm done!
Overall, there's nothing good about this episode. Even when I first saw this as a little kid, I recall declaring it my least favorite episode of the entire show. It's slow as the characters are all completely unlikable, and topped off with one of the worst endings I've seen in any episode. And I have no trouble calling it not just the worst episode of season 6, but the lowest in all of SpongeBob's history. It is that terrible.
Your song? What are you, some kind of...
That's right. I'm a singing traffic cop.
Singing traffic?
Oh, solo mio.
And those were my least favorite episodes of season 6. Finally. Now let's move on along to the best episodes of season 6. Like I said before, while I do really like these episodes, I can't say the better episodes of the season, with the minor exception of maybe my number 1 and 2 pick, could really salvage this season for me. But no more further delaying. Let's just take a look at these standouts. Number 5. Spongegus. In this episode, Plankton demolishes the Chum Bucket to make way for a coliseum, where he hosts a gladiator battle against a lionfish. SpongeBob and Krabs attend the event to see what Plankton is planning, and it turns out he's pinning the lionfish against Patrick in an attempt to give the audience a brutal mauling. This is when SpongeBob intervenes with the battle to save Patrick. Just like in the last video, picking the number 5 pick was really difficult. I ended up having to dig real deep to make sure I was confident with what I had for my number 5 pick. Some honorable mentions include The Krabby Chronicle, Suction Cup Symphony, Penny Foolish, and Shell Shocked. The reason why I picked Spongegus as my number 5 pick is because, well, I just really like the concept and I think it's executed fine. Compared to the other episodes which feel like missed opportunities, this one actually follows its concept and premise well. I actually really liked Plankton's plan in this episode. And most of the time, he has had pretty good plans. Plus, I did actually find this episode pretty funny.
That lower life form can slander me name and desecrate me mother's grave.
I'm right here.
Really, my biggest complaint with this episode is that the resolution feels like a cop-out. It's so obvious, and I'm surprised it took a while for them to realize it. But overall, I did actually have a pretty good time with this episode. And it seemed like a nice start before the season plummeted towards the ground like an anvil.
I intend to enrich your lives culturally by exhibiting the moist spectacle of gladiators in mortal conflict. My corporate underwriters told me to mention that it's free!
Number 4. No Hat for Pat. Envious of SpongeBob having a job and work hat, Patrick tries to get a job at the Krusty Krab. He's then given the job to entertain the customers as he keeps falling on his face with the hat on his head. This, however, concerns SpongeBob because of the injuries Patrick sustains from his act, but Patrick pleads that he wants to keep his job. It might not seem as strong as Big Pink Loser, but I do still think this episode does a good job with its concept of Patrick getting a job at the Krusty Krab. Admittedly, I did figure out what was going on with Patrick when he kept falling on his face, but this surprisingly didn't detract from the episode at all, because when this lacks in creativity and unpredictableness, it does make up for it with its comedy. And it doesn't actually flanderize any of its characters, unlike most other episodes following season 6. They all still feel in line with their personality, with SpongeBob looking out for Patrick's safety, to Mr. Krabs taking advantage of Patrick's stupidity, which ends up biting him in the ass later on. And it does actually feel believable that Patrick wants to keep his job no matter what, even if it does feel unsafe for him. And I think that's what really makes this episode stand out in comparison to a lot of the other episodes in this season. If this was released during the first 5 seasons, then I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's actually that good.
What if I added a box? Huh?
Sort of the same, really.
Oh, okay. So what if he flopped from 2 boxes into cream pie?
I like pie.
Say now.
That I'd say to say.
Number 3. Sandcastles in the sand. In honor of their best friendship, SpongeBob and Patrick head to the beach for a whole day for fun in the sand. They decide to build sandcastles, but they take this activity way too seriously, to a point they try to get back at each other. Eventually, they start to build larger and larger sandcastles as they go into full-on battle mode. This episode is pure fun. Much like No Hat for Pat, this feels like something that would come out of the first 5 or, heck, even the first 3 seasons of the show. Well, I mean, at least when we get to the beach part of the episode. The first few minutes beforehand were really nothing all that special, and in fact, I found it a bit annoying. And I'd argue it's the lowest point of the episode.
Oh, bus driver. What? Okay, out of everyone on this bus, guess which one is my best friend?
Comedy.
But once we make it to the beach, that's when the episode really kicks into high gear. First off, just look at these visuals. I am very impressed at what SpongeBob and Patrick were able to accomplish in the sand. And watching them battle it out in the sand is really entertaining. I was legitimately on the edge of my seat for a large portion of this episode. Not to mention, this episode is really, 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 really funny. In fact, I'd argue it's the funniest thing to come out of the post-movie era.
How you like them apples?
I legitimately don't know what else there is to say about this episode. It's just so good. It feels like a crime this episode ended up in the 6th season of the show. But it doesn't detract from the fact that this is still a fantastic episode.
Patrick! Are you okay?
Question is, will you be?
Number 2. Chum Bucket Supreme. In this episode, Plankton attempts to promote the Chum Bucket with a slogan, but Patrick intervenes with the situation, and this attracts a large chunk of Bikini Bottom to eat the Chum Bucket. Plankton then hires Patrick to help out with the Chum Bucket with new ways to attract customers, and this works out well. I had to admit there are a few glaring issues I have with this episode. Like how the customers are actually willing to buy and eat the chum just because of a good catchphrase, which felt completely ludicrous. And I found the ending to be just stupid. But despite that, I feel like the character interactions and humor more than make up for it. This is actually the first time we see Patrick work with Plankton to accomplish his goals. Sure, we had the fry cook games, but I think this is a much better episode, since it actually puts more focus on the Chum Bucket, and it could also lead to plenty of funny moments.
Chum is fum. We've kind of got that one already.
Oh, I like that one!
Oh well. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Speaking of which, I think this episode can be really funny, with each joke consistently making me laugh. It never feels like it peaks at any moment.
He stole the formula. I thought you'd say that.
All in all, I think Chum Bucket Supreme is a really great episode. It might not be Plankton's best episode from the season, let alone the entire show, but it does stand out as one of the better Season 6 episodes.
Okay, so maybe it'll take a little longer than a few minutes.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Wait, what are we doing again?
Number 1. Chum Caverns. After another failed attempt to steal the formula, Plankton stumbles upon a hidden cavern. He then comes up with the idea to relocate his restaurant in the caverns to attract customers with the scenery. This works as everyone, including SpongeBob, spends their time and money at the Chum Caverns. So Krabs decides to fight fire with fire and get his customers back. This episode is essentially Chum Bucket Supreme, but instead of Patrick working on slogans, Plankton takes advantage of a cavern. And this episode actually manages to work around the problems of that episode. The customers feeling inclined to buy the chum is actually more justified. And Plankton's plan in this episode is a lot smarter. Plus, we actually see Mr. Krabs try to work around the situation, unlike Chum Bucket Supreme. On top of that, I found the visuals in this episode to be really appealing. It doesn't mostly come across as cringe-inducing or awkward. Oh, and the video game fanboy in me really loves the little Dig Dug reference. It's pretty charming and funny. In fact, any problems I would have with this episode would just be incredibly minor, like how Mr. Krabs sneaks the formula under the floorboard, and I'll never understand how them being trapped underground in the Krusty Krab is any good, because you will eventually run out of Krabby Patty meat. But aside from that, I could barely find much wrong with this episode. I like the concept of this episode, the humor is pretty good, the visuals are pretty to look at. It may not stand out as one of the best episodes of the show, but it's nonetheless my favorite episode of Season 6.
Eat your twisted, blackened, money-grubbing heart out, Krabs. I'm even profiting off your most loyal ally. I'm running out of space for this stuff. Got an empty safe I can borrow, Krabs? But seriously, this is getting really heavy.
And those are my favorite episodes of Season 6. Seriously. But anyways, what are your favorite and least favorite episodes of this season? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to know when my next video is out. And until next time... pray for me.